Hey, okay, so something has been circulating and it really bothers me. Um, since the final trailer has dropped, this particular statement has been going around. It says that old things need to die, and it talks about the classic trilogy. So, um, let's have a little history lesson. One of the great things about being Princess Blondehead is I get to talk to people of all ages. And I have talked to people who got to see the original Star Wars in the theater. And I love hearing their experience seeing it in the theater. I mean, I've heard my dad talk about it all the time. I've heard that story so many times, but he like turns into a little kid. And I mean, that's what Star Wars is, you know? In my opinion, if it takes you back to childhood, that's what it is. That's what it's meant to be. So, one of the things that I hear quite a bit is that in the 70s, science fiction just wasn't a thing anymore. I mean, it's like putting out a Western now. In 2019, that's just not a thing. So, good luck with that. But that's how it was with science fiction back in the day. And George Lucas has said several times in several different interviews back in the late 90s and then again in the early 2000s. He knew that he was taking a risk because he was seeing all these other science fiction films flop. So um yeah, that's one of the things he's been consistent on. We know how Lucas is. And but yeah, a lot of people said that they weren't that interested when they heard about Star Wars because one more science fiction film. Who cares, Some people told me that they went ahead and saw it because of Alec Guinness, they're Alec Guinness. One of those instances where you hear the name, so you go ahead and see it. One person told me that they couldn't believe that Alec Guinness was in a science fiction movie, so they had to see it to believe it. And then they got sucked into the story, And of course, Peter Cushing, um, being in the horror genre and of course playing Sherlock, quite a few people went to see him. Look, I'm a huge Christian Bale fan, so of course I support the guy and I see quite a few of his films. And so I get it, you know if if your actor or actress is going to be in a film, you go and you see it, that's what you do. And so I've heard quite a few stories about that. And my uncle told me one time, he said that he dug in his heels. He wasn't going to see it. He just was not interested. He was not going to see it. He didn't care what anyone at school told him because he was in high school at the time. And he just didn't care. It sounded stupid. Star Wars, really? And you have to think about it. In the 70s, it does sound kind of ridiculous. And I mean, we're surrounded by it now. But in the 70s, it's a new movie, and it does sound kind of silly. But he had a friend who saw it and was just, he wanted my uncle to see it, and he had to see it, and this is a great movie, you have to see it. And my uncle just, no, I'm not going to see it. His friend tricked him to see this movie. Paid his way into the theater, said that they were going to see something else, and ended up seeing. And my uncle was mad at first and actually wanted to leave, but then he saw that cruiser going and he's like, that was cool. That was amazing. And when you grow up and you see it on TV, it doesn't have the same effect. When I saw the special edition in the theater, I'm like, this is what they meant. It's like, oh my gosh. it's a whole different effect, man. When you see that ship coming, and I mean, that was, and my dad tells me, he's like, that had never been done before. So I can imagine these people watching it in the 70s, seeing that, and no other movie had done that before. Oh, yeah, that's amazing. That would give you chills. And, I mean, just with that opening right there, yeah, Lucas was a genius with that. I mean, these days you see stuff like that, and so I can imagine, but like my dad said, never been done before. And you think about it, you think about all these different movies. No, it hadn't. And even with a lot of the silent films I've seen, no, hadn't. So, but so there were a lot of people who were just digging in their heels, didn't want to see it because it was a science fiction, just like my uncle. And there were a lot of other people who they were like, okay, I guess I'll go see it. And another one that I heard was that they went ahead and they saw it because they wanted to hear John Williams. Now, John Williams had done quite a few other scores, Superman and that sort of thing. So they wanted to hear the music. They wanted to hear, okay, so he's going into the science fiction thing. What's that going to sound like? Well, so they went and they listened. And so, I mean, you had these skeptics going in and listening and watching and all of this. But yeah, it was just one of those things where science fiction had run its course. Well, then it was kick-started again. But you take into consideration, if it had flopped, what, I mean, there Lucas wouldn't have the money to make a sequel. We wouldn't have Empire Strikes Back. We wouldn't have Return of the Jedi. There would be no sequels. Uh, there would be no holiday special. There would be no Ewok Adventures. There would be Star Tours wouldn't be there. I mean, why would Disneyland put something in there that flopped? They were a little more responsible back then. And even with Michael Eisner being who he was, yeah, it was a different person back then. And yeah, he wasn't very responsible back then, but he had his moments. And I remember him coming up in the special, right before they would show movies or whatever, and he would be with Mickey and Minnie and everything. But that's not the point of this. But yeah, Star Tours wouldn't be in Disneyland. The park thing that's in now, the new one, wouldn't exist. I mean, you just go down the list of all the stuff that, if Star Wars in '77 had face planted, basically, we wouldn't have any of that. And so this idea of let the old die, well, it's quite possible it would have, and then you wouldn't have all this cool stuff. You wouldn't have that park. You wouldn't have these movies. You wouldn't have the animated series. You wouldn't have. I mean, you wouldn't have the video games. You wouldn't have the extended universe. Wouldn't exist. You wouldn't have any of it. Like none of it. And who's to say that somebody would, like Labyrinth bombed, but it got a new following. Would that happen with Star Wars? I don't know. But because of its success is why it has a franchise. But if it bombed like all the others, who knows? I mean, Rocketeer was supposed to be a trilogy. And it bombed so bad that there was no money to even make a second movie. that could have been Star Wars. So it does bother me that people are so ready to, let the old die. Well, it could have. it, there was a chance that it could have, because of the fact that other science fiction films were not making it in the 70s. Much like I said, Western movies, you make one now, it could it could bomb because nobody wants one in 2019. And so I think, what needs to be done is you appreciate the fact that it was successful. Because if it hadn't been, all the Star Wars that's happening now, the franchise and everything, wouldn't be possible if it had bombed. It is possible now because of its success in 1977. So, it's just something to take into consideration. So.